Recording in progress.
What's going on, everybody? Good morning. How's everybody doing today? Let me go ahead and get a couple things started here on my end. All right. Put a one in the chat if y'all can hear me clearly. Y'all know the deal. All right, there we go. So I am now currently live on IG as well as YouTube, and I am in the Zoom call as well, right? So folks who want to jump in on Zoom and get on the mic and ask questions, right? You can do that also. So for those of you who are tribe members, you got access to the Zoom link. So that's how we doing there. All right, so we got ones in the chat. We're good. We're good. All right. Here we go. Hold on, let me back up off my mic. I don't want to be too loud. They're gonna let me know if I'm too loud on the mic. You know what I'm saying? There's always the battle with the sound. All right, so what we got to talk about today, right? We got to talk about food pairing, right? We got to talk about food pairing in relation to gut health. And we got to talk about the nuances in particular of mixing the beautiful, simple sugars of fruit combined with the fatty nature of nuts or fatty foods in general, right? So on a fruitarian or raw vegan fruit-based diet, right, whichever one you'd like to call it, there's a bit of confusion around pairing fruits and nuts together. Some people, not all, but some people will combine fruit and nuts together, or when they have, they've experienced gas and bloating, right? To maybe some mild degree or very severe degree, right? I'm interested to know too, like for those of you in the chat, put in the chat if you actually experience this, right? You eat fruit and you add nuts in with the fruit and you experience some serious like gut issues, right? Gas, bloating, pain, constipation, things like this, right? And I want to give a more clear answer as to why, right? Because not everybody needs to follow the same situation. Not everybody needs to follow the same protocol. So for me in particular, I always take a very nuanced approach to these issues, right? I don't do the cookie cutter thing for everybody because it's a bit nuanced. So if you have gas, bloating, which are the two most frequent things, and that intense gas and bloating can actually lead to gut discomfort or just outright pain, right? You can even feel like you have this giant air or water belly. It's heavy. If you have issues like that, it's usually be due to a lack of stomach acid and digestive enzymes, right? That lack of stomach acid and digestive enzymes can lead to an excessive and uncontrolled increase in fungus, right? Yeast, candida, right? Bad bacteria, right? Bacterial overgrowth, SIBO, things like this that form in your upper gut, right? Your stomach is supposed to be very acidic, right? Unlike most places in your body, right? There's a high concentration of acid in your stomach, right? You have an appropriate abundance of hydrochloric acid that is needed, especially in order to break down rather dense foods. Right? This can be starches, but especially fats and protein, right? And if you don't have that, especially if you're eating a lot of fat and protein in your diet, you really need a lot of the stomach acid to break down the fat and protein. A lot of people will follow like a raw vegan diet because they experience a lot of gut health issues, right? It's very important to know what your issue is in order to know which approach to follow. Now, for me in particular, generally speaking, it's fine to add nuts and seeds and fruits and things like that combined with each other. On average, it's really not an issue, but it does depend on how much fat you add. So I've found a bit of a sweet spot for people, right? So my general recommendation for most people is you can have an abundance of fruit in a meal. So what that would look like is you can have anywhere from 1 pound to 3 pounds of fruit within a meal. And then you can add in like an ounce of nuts and or seeds to that meal. That's typically what I go for. So what this ends up being is this ends up being anywhere from like, let's say 86 grams of carbs to like 120 grams of carbs worth of fruit. And you can pair that with, like, let's say generally a maximum of 25 grams of fat within that meal, right? More so, if I was to give you a range, it would be 16 to 25 grams of fat per meal. That seems to be the threshold that works for most people, right? That's typically going to be like an ounce of nuts and or seeds, like an ounce, right? So you can add an ounce of Brazil nuts, an ounce of almonds, an ounce of walnuts, this type of thing. Now, the interesting thing with this too is the type of nut or seed you add is gonna make a big difference. So, for example, people with gut health issues tend to do better with nuts and seeds that are higher in omega-3 essential fatty acids. So, for example, let's take peanuts versus walnuts. People with a lot of gut health issues tend to do way better with walnuts than peanuts, right? And the interesting thing is walnuts are much higher in omega-3 essential fatty acids, whereas peanuts are much higher in omega-6. Walnuts have a higher concentration of dietary fats, whereas peanuts have a higher concentration of protein. Right, so these types of nuances matter. So when you have gut health issues or you have chronic inflammation in your gut and things like this, walnuts may be a better option, right? Flax seeds may be a better option. Chia seeds may be a better option, right? Pumpkin seed kernels may be a better option. Your seeds in general are a better option than like nuts, especially nuts that are like higher in protein. Like almonds. Almonds give people a lot of issues with gut health issues. Almonds and peanuts, right? They tend to give people a lot of issues. So your seeds are a bit of a better option. Your sunflower seed kernels, pumpkin seed kernels, flax, chia, hemp seeds, this type of thing. So these are the nuances. Then there's the issue of what your goal is. Are you trying to gain weight? Are you trying to lose weight? Are you insulin resistant, right? Are you diabetic? If you're diabetic, well, your plan is going to be a bit more nuanced. For diabetics, the reason why food pairing matters is because, and it is dose dependent. There is like an antagonistic relationship between insulin and glucagon, right? So your pancreas has a variety of different hormones that is responsible for secreting and synthesizing and secreting, right? In order to assist in digestion and the maintenance of your hunger hormones and things like this. But in particular, you have insulin, and insulin is needed in order to shuttle glucose to your cells, right? And then you have glucagon, which is like this counteracting hormone, where the higher it is, that suppresses insulin. So there's a trade-off between the two. Glucagon is a hormone that increases fat metabolism, right? And specifically increases fat metabolism inside your liver. And then when the fat stored inside your liver, or the glucose, as in glycogen, inside your liver drops low enough, you get more fat metabolism from your fat cells, right? So if you really reduce the carbohydrates that you consume and you replace that with fats, you get higher levels of glucagon release. this people will use this, like for example, in a keto diet or something like that, in order to really ramp up fat loss. It's the idea behind it. You're leveraging glucagon in the pursuit of dropping your blood sugar and really ramping up more consistent fat metabolism, right? It doesn't really quite play out that way for most people, because ultimately what happens is glucagon increases your blood sugar. And then if your cortisol levels are really high, then cortisol and glucagon combined together both increase your blood sugar. So your blood sugar keeps increasing if you're insulin resistant. And so what happens is, yes, you're getting a higher level of fat metabolism, but your blood sugar is also going up much higher. And this suppresses your appetite, right? So cortisol, adrenaline, glucagon, all of these things suppress your appetite. So you get more alertness and mental focus from your adrenal glands firing, right? And then this also suppresses your appetite, but also keeps your blood sugar elevated, which stalls out fat metabolism. So you get less and less glucagon as a result, and then it's all adrenal output. So then you end up being fatigued because your blood sugar is not being reduced, because the blood sugar is not being sent to your brain and your nervous system and your skeletal muscle and all that. And so you end up being kind of wired. Maybe you have excessive anxiety, high blood pressure, but you're also tired and fatigued with low sleep quality and high blood sugar all the time, even though you barely eat carbs. So there's these other things that come into play where you get diminishing returns from something like that. Right? And this is why I give you the nuance, because it's like, in theory, people say, oh, if you lower insulin enough and you raise glucagon, you lose weight. Kind of, but it depends on how long you do it, right? And it depends on the pre-existing conditions that you're experiencing when you do it. But in any case, if you're diabetic, you can pursue, rather than the high fat amount, you can do, let's say, an even mix of both, where you want to do an even mix of fat, right? When you do an even mix, what happens is you're not adequately leveraging insulin or glucagon, right? So if you're eating equal levels of fat and carbohydrates, and you're doing that with a metabolic issue, like insulin resistance or just full-blown type 2 diabetes, you're not really improving insulin sensitivity, and you're not really maximizing fat loss either, because that insulin and glucagon are kind of being deployed at the same time, but they're acting against each other, right? These are two counteracting hormones. They're supposed to rise and fall in an inverse to each other. So in order to correct this metabolic disorder, you would have to lean more so into one as opposed to the other, and you would need a dietary approach for that. So for me, it's going to be mainly at least 50% of your macros would be from carbohydrates, right? So the threshold would be anywhere from 50% to 80% carbs, right? That's the complete range. For me, for diabetics, the approach is going to be more so in between 65% carbs and a minimum of 50%. Depending on how insulin resistant you are, I would be closer to 65%, and in some cases, even 70 to 75%. So there's a bit of nuance. When it comes to food pairing, though, a general rule that I would give diabetics is typically you only really want to have anywhere between 15 to 25 grams of fat, or 15 to 20 grams of fat within a meal, of any given meal. So you can have 3 or 4 meals a day, and each of those meals would contain anywhere from 15 to 20 or 25 grams of fat within a meal, give or take. And it's a good general guideline to follow. So you can eat fruits, and then you can add in like an ounce of nuts and seeds. So that's the issue with that, right? Now, let's say you have a low stomach acid issue. And quite frankly, a lot of raw vegans have this issue too, because a lot of raw vegans, especially, they get into, I want to be raw vegan and really high carb and really reduce dietary fats as much as possible, right? So you have like, the raw vegans, especially like fruitarians, where they're like, I only eat fruit and occasionally leafy greens, and I barely eat any fat. Just understand that when you do that, when you're cutting your fat and protein intake low enough, you drive down your stomach acid. Because interesting enough, dietary fat, when you consume dietary fat, this increases the level of stomach acid that your gut produces, because your gut will produce stomach acid in relation to how much fat and protein you eat. So reducing fat and protein could be good, but to a point, it depends on how much you reduce it and for how long. So when you're just like, I only eat fruits, I don't really eat anything else, well, you can drive down your stomach acid way too much. And you can drive down trypsin and pepsin in particular, which are two very important stomach enzymes or digestive enzymes that are needed in order to break down fats and protein. So if you don't really consume much fat and protein, you can drive down those digestive enzymes too much. And you can drive down your stomach acid for too much. Okay? So now what happens is if you start adding in these foods into your diet, you can start experiencing digestive discomfort, gas, bloating, constipation, things like this, because you've disincentivized your gut from being able to have this healthy balance of stomach acid and digestive enzymes. This is what a lot of like really high carb raw vegans end up experiencing. Right? So for me personally, I never take a dogmatic approach towards one thing or the other because of that. Right? It's not that simple. Yeah, I always compare it to like a roadmap. How do you know what the direction is? Let's say you want to get to a particular place on a map. In order to determine what direction you go in, you would have to know where you currently are on the map in relation to your destination. Right? So if you want to know what direction you need to go in, you're not able to really figure out what direction you need to go in until you know where you're at. So when people ask me, well, what should I eat for this and that? I'm like, well, it depends on what you've been doing the most. What have you been doing the longest and been doing the most? Right? If somebody has already been a raw vegan and they're used to a really low fat, low protein diet, my recommendations for them is going to be very different than somebody else who has come from a diet where they have cut their carbohydrates to the bone for a really long period of time, and their diet has mostly been fat and protein, like a keto or a carnivore diet. The approach is going to be pretty different between the two. It can be very beneficial to lean really into, like, you can cut all of your fats out of your diet. Well, not all, but like you can cut your fat and protein down to like 10%, maybe even less than that. And that can be very beneficial, but the longer you do it, just understand, you get diminishing returns. And then you start getting negative side effects from doing it the longer you do it. So this is why I'm a big fan of seasonal eating. And seasonal eating is going to largely dictate food pairing. All right. And I'm going to get to some of y'all in the comments here too. So just give me a second. Somebody asked me about fermented foods, and I'm getting into that. So for me in diet plans, a lot of the times what I do is the first meal is going to be some type of melon, right? So we are in the fall season, right? So we're no longer in watermelon season. So things are going to be a bit different now. So I know for me, my last grocery order, I got like 4 pineapples. Pineapple's not really seasonal, but we get them in abundance here. It's pretty easy to get pineapple, right? Honeydew, though, takes center stage. So pretty much I've replaced watermelon with honeydew. I got these big old honeydew. These honeydew are like 4 pounds. They're huge, these honeydew. And they're pretty ripe, too. I got some really good honeydew. And then citrus fruits. So grapefruit, tangerines, right? All different types of citrus fruits. Those take center stage for me in this season. Apples, grapes. Right? So we got kiwis, berries, apples, grapes, citrus fruit, honeydew melon, also cantaloupe, right? And then pineapple. These are like the 8 fruits I've mainly been getting, right? And then as far as nuts are concerned, the nuts primarily that I've been getting are peanuts, cashews, almonds, walnuts, and Brazil nuts. So, for example, your first meal could be like, let's say, honeydew. It could be like 2 pounds of honeydew and 1 ounce of Brazil nuts. And the Brazil nuts are really good for pretty much getting all of your selenium. It comes with an abundance of selenium. Brazil nuts are really high in selenium. One question people ask me is 1 ounce of Brazil nuts, isn't that way too much selenium? And the answer is, well, no, not really, because it's not like you're supplementing with selenium. Your digestive system largely regulates how much selenium you absorb, right? So there can be a really, really high concentration of selenium in a given food. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get an over absorption of the selenium, because your gut regulates that. Your gut pretty much regulates the absorption of everything, especially the fat-soluble things, right? But minerals, your minerals are going to be pretty tightly regulated, especially iron, for example, right? Iron is very important, but too much iron at one time can be devastating, and it can have very, very negative implications for your liver in particular, right? So you don't really want to have too much iron in your system at a time, right? You want to have just enough. But in any case, so basically, now you may ask, well, what if I have like gut health issues? For the most part, the honeydew, if you paired that with 1 ounce of Brazil nuts, people don't really tend to have an issue with that. People do pretty well with it. Some people may disagree with me. Some people say, well, the reason why you can't mix dietary fats with fruits, or you shouldn't, is because when you combine fat with the sugar in fruit, it slows down gastric emptying, right? It causes fermentation in your stomach, right? I'm curious, put a 1 in the chat if y'all heard this before. Like, oh, it causes fermentation in your stomach, right? When you mix the sugar and fat together, it causes fermentation in your stomach. They like to use this, it keeps the food in your stomach for too long, causes fermentation. Or people don't even say in your stomach, they just say in your gut. Fermentation in your gut. And this is this is kind of true in certain circumstances, but again, it's dose dependent, right? If you ever read like scientific literature, they never really make strong claims like this will do that. They usually say this can do that, or right? They use the word can. They use softer language. It's not really, because in order to make an extraordinary hard and fast claim, you need really, really strong evidence for it. Right? Like something has to happen like damn near 100% of the time for there to be like a strong affirmation of, oh, this will do that, period. Right? It's very strong language. When you say, well, you can't pair sugar and fat together, well, how much sugar and fat together? How much? What's the ratio? Is it 2 to 1? Is it 3 to 1? Is it 1 to 1? Is it 4 to 1? What's the ratio? Right? Now, if we think about fermentation in your upper gut or your lower gut, fermentation in your lower gut is not necessarily a bad thing. Right? When you eat dietary fiber, that dietary fiber works its way through your digestive tract and ends up in your lower gut and then serves as prebiotic fiber in order to feed your beneficial gut bacteria. And then in turn, your beneficial gut bacteria goes through a metabolic process, a respiration, right? And then your gut bacteria produces something called postbiotics. This is things like B12, right? Methylcobalamin. This is where you get folate. This is where you get vitamin K2, right? In particular, MK4, MK7, things like this. These are postbiotics. This is where you get short-chain fatty acids that activate the secretion of things like GLP-1, right? From your intestines. Right? When we think about Ozempic is GLP-1. Your gut actually produces GLP-1 naturally. And, people will say, oh, you drink apple cider vinegar in the morning and you get increased fat metabolism and you get increased energy and it controls appetite and whoop, 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 right? Lowers blood sugar, all this. But why is that? Well, because the apple cider vinegar acts as a short chain fatty acid, right? and that activates GLP-1 release. Well, if you were to eat an apple, the apple pectin goes to your lower gut, and then that feeds your gut bacteria. And your gut bacteria produce a postbiotic called short-chain fatty acids, and that activates GLP-1 in the gut. The same thing. This is all implicated by your gut health, your gut microbiome, right? However, postbiotics from bacterial buildup in your upper gut, like in your stomach, well, that's a problem, because this is where you can now experience things like acid reflux, right? This is where you can experience a lot of gas and bloating and bad breath and things like that, right? So the idea is, well, when you pair the carbohydrates and the fats together in a meal, normally the fruits and whatnot break down really quickly, so it doesn't stay in your stomach for very long. But if you add fat and protein to that mix, then the sugar stays in your stomach for a longer period of time, along with the fat and the protein. And then the bacteria or fungus, like a yeast, for example, or a candida, feed on the sugar. And then that bacteria or yeast produces a byproduct in its respiration, in its metabolic processes, things like CO2, right? Carbon dioxide, which is a byproduct of oxygen metabolism, right? You get an increase in what's that called? Why am I blanking on the term? Methane, right? And so you get these things, and this is where you get the gas from. This is where you get the bloating from, right? And that's what they blame it on. So that's why you shouldn't pair fat and sugar together. And it's like, understand that you can't get the gas and the bloating and all of that type of stuff without the candida, the yeast, or bad bacteria undergirding it. So what the statement should be is you should not pair significant amounts of sugar and fat together. So for example, you should not pair 60 to 80 grams worth of fruit together with 60 to 80 grams of fat together in a meal if you have a yeast or a candida or SIBO or something like this. If you have some type of gut dysbiosis where you have an overgrowth of fungus and bacteria in your upper gut, that's really what the suggestion should be. This is not a hard and fast rule for everyone. Right? You don't get the excessive what's this? Something just popped up on my screen here. Don't get these issues of the gas and the bloating with an gut health issue, which if you have an underlying gut health issue, doesn't necessarily some update stuff. You don't get from mixing fat and why does this keep popping? What's this nerve? All right. Am I looking choppy? So a high raw vegan diet can increase GLP. Yes. Yes. This is the reason why like a raw vegan diet or a high raw vegan diet is so effective for reversing things like diabetes and insulin resistance, right? It's because it significantly improves gut health and GLP-1 secretion. So what should you do if you have like this underlying yeast and bacteria and all of that, right? What should you do if this is the case? Because just understand, this is not a thing that's specifically like, oh, you just specifically shouldn't combine fruit and nuts together. This is likely, this mostly applies to like processed dry foods, cakes, cookies, things like this. Because, you know, when we talk about processed foods, for example, cheeseburger, right? The bread, So it's processed, high carbs, it's dry, right? And this is going to really feed yeast. It's going to really feed bad bacteria, right? Because it's low in fiber, it's high in processed dry sugar. And then you have the burger patty, whether even if it's a vegan burger patty, high in protein, high in fat, it's going to slow down gastric emptying, right? Because fat and protein take longer to digest, so it's going to slow down gastric emptying. This can apply to that. This can apply to cookies, cakes, donuts, things like this, any kind of pastries, because these things are made using things like eggs and, wheat, any type of flour, sometimes dairy, milk, things like this. Even plant-based milks will use things like cashews or almonds or, soy, things like that. And there's still going to be a significant amount of fat in that, right? So even like processed vegan foods, still you're mixing a substantial amount of sugar and fat together. And processed foods are not water-rich foods, they're dry foods, right? And the drier your food is, the slower the gastric emptying is going to be and the more negative the effects are going to be, right? So if you pair melon, let's say honeydew, with like, you're really going to get a negative side effect from that? Well, not really, because melons are like 90% water. Far from, so you can eat like 3 pounds of honeydew or something like this, 80 something grams of carbs, and then you like eat an ounce of nuts or something like this, and you maybe get like 16 to 20 grams of fat. You're not going to really have this slow gastric emptying because it's a very water-rich food, and the food it's a high level of soluble fiber, right? So you don't get the same gas and bloating and constipation and all of that like you with melon. Now, let's say if you eat 8 to 12 ounces of apple and you pair that with like nuts, that's a different story. Apples are not as water rich, but apples are really, really packed with fiber, right? So all that apple pectin combined with the fat and the protein, but now you can get some pretty serious gas and bloating issues. So food choice, right? What is the water content of the food? What is the caloric density of the food? And then what type of nut are you pairing it with? Are you pairing it with walnuts? Are you pairing it with almonds, right? This type of thing, it matters, right? What is the omega-3 concentration? What is the magnesium concentration? Foods that have a higher magnesium concentration, well, that's a bit of a different story, right? But what should you do? Now, generally speaking, if someone has like high blood pressure, diabetes, you got gut dysbiosis, this type of thing, you got candida, right? SIBO, things like this. Well, is it safe to eat fruit? Yes. Right? If you remove everything else, you just have like a fruit-based diet, that can really help rectify those issues. The fiber is actually really important for clearing yeast and bad bacteria out of your stomach because the fiber binds to these things, right? So fiber is used as like a cleanup mechanism. So if you have an overpopulation of yeast in your gut, you have an overpopulation of bad bacteria in your gut, the dietary fiber, both soluble and insoluble fiber, bind to it and then pulls it out of your digestive tract. Okay. And then when you hydrate your gut, you dilute waste. The drier your diet is, the more negative the side effects are going to be, right? So like a raw diet is a very water-rich diet, generally speaking, if it's fruit-based, right? So basically, the more hydrated you are, the less gas and bloating and all of this type of stuff you get. But when you're chronically dehydrated, well, these issues become amplified. Right? Like acid reflux is a pretty big symptom with people who are chronically dehydrated. If you're chronically dehydrated and you have a low magnesium diet, you're going to get things like acid reflux. Even like when you look at like antacids, right? It's basically calcium bicarbonate. Calcium bicarbonate is a form of calcium, and they often mix like potassium and whatnot in it. And what that does is that alkalizes the environment in your stomach to reduce right? So you get less of acid accumulation that rises up into your lower esophagus. That's what the antacid is supposed to do. However, if you have a diet that is rich in potassium and magnesium and water-rich foods, that also acts as an antacid. However, it reverses gut dysbiosis. If you buy an antacid from the store, it does not reverse gut dysbiosis because it only addresses the acid that is a result of the yeast and bacteria producing or excreting acid as a waste product. It's not stomach acid that's rising up into your lower esophagus, really, right? It's the postbiotic that you're getting from the metabolic waste of bad bacteria and yeast in your upper gut, right? Now, I'm only talking about gut dysbiosis because some people it's a little bit different. They have an issue. Their nervous system is not opening and closing the valve to their upper gut. So what happens is it stays open for too long when they eat, and then the actual stomach acid rises up into their lower esophagus. Right? That's not a bad bacteria or a yeast issue. That's a nervous system issue where the port's not closing. Right? After digestion. So during digestion. So it's a bit different. That's a nervous system thing. Right? Which requires a whole different approach, right? Which requires the reduction of the latency in your nervous system. This is a brain chemistry thing. It's not a gut health thing. So when you have more magnesium, potassium in your diet, and you have more, for example, B vitamins like vitamin B1, vitamin B2, vitamin B12. When you have more vitamin C, this largely corrects nervous system issues. When you have more magnesium, electrolytes, things like that in your diet, electrolytes in general, this fixes the nervous system thing, and it reduces latency. This is the case with people who have like AFib, right? When you in your diet, copper is another one. You have a high copper diet. This fixes a lot of nervous system issues, right? So issues that have to do with your nervous system, having a diet like that, high in copper, electrolytes, B vitamin, things like that, generally sort those issues out. I'm more so talking about gut dysbiosis, which is a lot more common, right? So basically what I would do is I would segment. If you're going to mix fruits and nuts together, you could, but I would only do 1 ounce at a time. And I would do the nuts and seeds that have higher concentrations of omega-3 essential fatty acids and that are typically lower in dietary protein. That's what I would recommend, right? So that would be things like walnuts. There would be things like chia seeds and flax seeds. Hemp seeds is an exception because hemp seeds are high in protein, but they're very high in copper, magnesium, and omega-3 essential fatty acids, right? So they're a bit different, right? They're a high protein food, but without the downside, right? So that would be the recommendation there. If you want to be on the safe side, you don't have to mix nuts with fruit. You don't have to, right? You can separate them entirely. Now, what you also have to do is you have a diet that's hydrating. You have a high energy diet. But you also have things where you can use like herbs, right? So you have herbs, and a lot of herbs have an antifungal, antibacterial element to them, right? Oh, by the way, with nervous system issues, L-theanine, really beneficial. So if you start your mornings with, let's say, matcha tea, or ginseng, or ginkgo biloba, or oolong tea, right? Things like this. Those are really good for fixing brain chemistry and nervous system issues. So before you eat anything, you drink the tea first. And then have your first meal. These things are also extremely beneficial for gut health and blood sugar control, things like this, right? A second tea would be something that's highly beneficial for your gut. This would be things like nettle tea, basil tea, And then some more stronger things would be things like clove tea. Clove is really beneficial for killing off yeast and bad bacteria in your upper gut. Right? So if you're having a lot of gas and bloating and things like this, basil tea can really soothe that. Nettle tea can really soothe that. Clove tea. And then also ginger turmeric tea or just ginger tea. Right? So what I like to do is you could do ginger tea, which basically, well, I would say ginger turmeric tea. So you could do a quarter teaspoon of ginger, a quarter teaspoon of turmeric, and a 1/8 of a teaspoon of cayenne pepper. That's a really phenomenal tea for, killing off yeast and whatnot in your gut. H. pylori, this could probably be like H. pylori. H. pylori produces a tremendous amount of acid. Right? It's a bacterial infection. So something like the ginger turmeric with the cayenne pepper, that can be too hot. Right? So it is effective at killing off the bad bacteria, but the thing is, ginger, turmeric, and cayenne pepper, they increase stomach acid. So it's a bit of a gamble. It could actually be really beneficial for you. It depends on how bad the H. pylori is. Right? So there is a bit of nuance, but generally speaking, if you have low stomach acid, the ginger, turmeric, and cayenne pepper is going to be really beneficial for bringing up your stomach acid and digestive enzymes. So it makes digestion a lot better. So like, let's say you have a meal that's a bit more dense. You have a meal that's higher in fat and protein. Maybe you have a meal that's higher in starches, things like this. Let's say you have a meal where you're eating avocado, sprouted lentils, sunflower seed kernels, leafy green vegetables, all that type of stuff, right? The higher levels of fat and protein in that meal can cause you some digestive distress. So before a meal like that, you may want to drink that ginger, turmeric, and cayenne pepper tea. And that's like prep to increase stomach acid, digestive enzymes, so that you don't get the gas and the bloating and all that, right? Something more mild bring up stomach acid and of bad bacteria and things like this. My typical recommendation is basil tea or tulsi tea. Right? It's a bit more mild. It's a bit more soothing. So it's either going to be nettle tea, basil tea, or fennel tea. Those are like the three typically. Right? So the herbs are really important. Okay. So you can basically do water-rich fruits all day long. Water-rich. So melon, grapes, berries, kiwis, and citrus fruits. Citrus fruits also, and pineapple contains bromelain, which is a digestive aid. Your digestive enzymes. You can then use pineapple. You can eat like 8 to 12 ounces of pineapple before a heavier meal. That's like an appetizer. And that can lead to better digestion, right? That can help to relieve constipation, gas, bloating, and things like that before meals. Right? Small amount of pineapple. Really good for digestive health. And then what you can also do is you can mix the pineapple and the papaya together. So you can do 8 ounces of papaya, 8 ounces of pineapple. You can mix those together, and you can add chia seeds also. And you can even make a smoothie bowl out of this, where you mix in, you can blend in a blender papaya, chia seeds, and coconut yogurt together in a blender. You can mix it up in the blender, and you can add pineapple to it. Right? You can also add berries. You can add strawberries and things like that to it as well. And that's the thing that can really help with digestive health too. So you get the omega-3 essential fatty acids and chia seeds, and omega-3 essential fatty acids and magnesium and copper, as well as soluble and insoluble fiber from the chia seeds. The coconut yogurt, and you can use almond yogurt, coconut yogurt, cashew yogurt, oat yogurt, whatever the case is. And it's a fermented food that serves as a way of introducing more beneficial gut bacteria. So you can bring your gut bacteria, and that balances out bad bacteria. And that improves digestion as well. right? Because your level of digestive enzymes and adequate levels of stomach acid is largely dictated by your gut microbiome. So that would be like a good meal, and you add the pineapple to it also as an additional digestive aid, right? So you could leverage all these things. It just doesn't just have to just be monofruit meals. Monofruit meals are very important. I'm a big fan of monofruit meals. It serves as kind of like a bit of an elimination diet. It's easier to figure out if a food is bothering you or not. So you could do one meal and it's just like all honeydew or whatever kind of melon. You can even do a split between honeydew and cantaloupe, right? You could do 50-50. And you can also do a split between honeydew, cantaloupe, and papaya. And that would help even more with digestion, improving digestive health and whatnot. Then another meal could just be all grapes, right? 24 ounces of grapes, 20 ounces of grapes, somewhere along that. And then another meal can be like grapefruit and tangerines, just all citrus fruits. Phenomenal amount of potassium, vitamin C, good source of calcium as well, right? So a lot of electrolytes in those citrus fruits. And the citrus fruits goes a long way toward improving digestive enzymes, acid profile as well, right? So that aids in digestion, improving digestion. And that vitamin C goes a long way towards reducing excess acid accumulation. So it's good for kidney health. It's really important for adrenal health, right? So more vitamin C can actually reduce excess cortisol. So if your cortisol level's way too high, you have a high vitamin C diet, and that vitamin C helps to bring inflammation, bring down the cortisol, bring down the acid, and improve digestive health. You can do a mix of berries. You can do like a fruit salad where you're eating a variety of kiwis and berries and things like cherries and pomegranate, things like this mixed together. Basically, if you're doing kiwis and your berries, basically this is going to be a meal where you're getting a lot of copper, iron, chlorophyll, magnesium, vitamin K, vitamin C. So you can do a mix of, like, let's say arugula or spring mix, and you can mix in cucumber, which is high in silica. Also, you can mix in kiwis, strawberries, raspberries, blueberries, things like this in that fruit salad, right? And that's phenomenal for gut health. That's phenomenal for insulin sensitivity, blood pressure, kidney health, everything straight across the board, right? So that's another option. So when you're putting together your meals, these are things to consider as far as like having a medicinal diet that reverses gut dysbiosis. So you can have monofruit meals, and then that's a meal where you're mixing in a variety of fruits in order to produce a particular result. Interestingly enough, berries and kiwis and leafy greens together, that's a pretty significant amount of protein in a meal like that. And then you can have most of your dietary fats concentrated in a meal towards the end of the day. And that's where you would have things like avocado, leafy greens, onion and bell pepper, kind of depends. You can do onion and bell pepper, but if it bothers you, I would leave it out and just put in like cucumber to have something more mild. So you can do kale, rhubarb, and you can even do like a little bit of Napa cabbage if you wanted to have a little spice in your salad. So you do avocado, you do hemp seeds, sunflower seed kernels, you could do crushed walnuts, right? And like a beautiful, like a ranch dressing, right? And if you want a little bit more protein in your diet, add in sprouted green lentils or sprouted mung beans. Right? And for the sprouts, you could add in like anywhere from like 4 to like 7 ounces of the sprouted beans. It's a pretty good amount of protein, right? Good source of iron, copper, magnesium, good stuff. But adding in the sprouts and doing too much may cause you to have some gas loading issues. So if that's the case, you may want to back off of those things or just eat them separately. So you may have to prep for something like this. Another thing you can do, let's say if we remove the coconut yogurt, Or you don't even have to remove the coconut yogurt. Let's say for your second meal, you have the coconut yogurt bowl and all of that. And let's say before your fourth meal of the day, you have a cup of sauerkraut or a cup of kimchi. You could put it in a mug. Just eat it with a fork or whatever, right? And drink the juice and everything, right? Sauerkraut and kimchi. Really good fermented probiotic food, right? And that really helps to stave off or prevent all of these issues. All right. And that helps to kill off bad bacteria and yeast and all that and populate your gut with beneficial gut bacteria. That could be like a daily added vegetables. You can also do miso soup. So you can have a small portion of miso soup. Right. So basically what you do is you boil water and then you let the water cool off a little bit and you can add in like a tablespoon of miso paste. And then you can add in sliced leeks as well for like a vegetable. And you can eat that. You can drink that down. Right? You can add in leafings. You can make like a soup, like a vegetable soup with it. So you have a miso vegetable soup. Right? You can add in what I like to do with a miso soup is I like to do leeks and cabbage. Okay. And you can add in the sprouts to it as well. So you can have sprouts in it, like sprouted green lentils, bok choy, or like a basically it's Chinese cabbage, and sliced leeks. Leeks are they're like an onion, but it's a sea vegetable kind of like they grow in sand. Right? So they don't really grow like leeks don't grow underground like onions do. It's a bit different, right? It's like a stalk, like a green onion, basically. Right? Like a green onion, but not really. Because leeks, they grow above ground. In any case, you can have something like that, right? This is used in a lot of Chinese dishes, actually. Leeks. I'm a big fan of leeks. So I would put that in like a miso soup. And if you want a bit more protein and calcium and magnesium in your diet, you can add some tofu. Silken tofu is a bit easier to digest, and silken tofu goes very well in a soup. Okay? So you can add that to your miso soup as well. And you can have that before your last meal of the day or after. Right? So these are just some of the options that you have as far as like improving your gut health. So basically the point is it's a lot more nuanced. This is why I'm an advocate of a high raw diet though. Because soup isn't necessarily raw, right? If you're eating a soup that's going to make your diet more high, it's not really full raw. Right? But just because a food is raw doesn't mean that like, oh, it's a magic bullet. Like a raw vegan diet is not necessarily a magic bullet. You can have cooked things that are highly beneficial too. I just advocate for a diet to be mostly raw to be the most beneficial. When your diet is mostly raw, you're getting all of the live enzymes and live culture. You're not destroying the fiber and the micronutrient profile of a food by cooking it, right? Destroying a lot of these things during heat energy and that type of stuff. So there's a lot of medicinal benefit that comes from a raw, particularly fruit-based diet, right? Because a raw diet pretty much should be a diet that's abundant, that's mostly fruit, right? So basically you could be eating anywhere from like 6 to 8 pounds of fruit a day. And then like, everything else that isn't fruit, you eat those things a few ounces at a time. Right? So it's like a fruit-based diet because the overwhelming majority by weight of your food is going to be fruit. Right? So yeah, there's a lot more nuance, right? There's herbs. And then there's things like burdock root, which is really good for oxygenation of your blood, detoxifying your liver, kidneys, things like this. Because if you have like low stomach acid too, it depends. If you have low stomach acid because you've been like this really high carb raw vegan where you've cut all your fat out of your diet for a really long time, that's not necessarily like a liver issue. It's more so if you've been not having enough, for example, choline in your diet. Right. And so basically you get low bile, you get low stomach acid, low digestive enzymes as a result, right? So you would have to slowly add in more fats and protein into your diet, while also fixing the whole SIBO and candida issues and all that. Right? So having more fermented foods and things like that in your diet. If you come from like a low carb, high fat, high protein diet, like keto or carnivore or something like that, likely your issues are stemming from digestion of the liver. And then in that case, burdock root could be highly beneficial, right? Sea moss, bladder rack, right? Yellow dock, these types of things, right? Could be highly beneficial for your liver, adrenal glands, and kidneys, right? Because like this low carb, high fat, high protein diet is very acidic. So you have overaccumulation of lipids and acid and whatnot accumulating in your blood, which causes your adrenal glands to really So people will do like a diet, like, oh, I did a carnivore diet and I had alertness and, you know, I didn't have sugar cravings and all of that. It's like, well, yeah, sure, because your adrenal glands are pumping so hard to suppress your appetite. You know what else will stave off sugar cravings? A shot of adrenaline. Adrenaline suppresses sugar cravings. Right? But when you start eating more carbohydrates and you cut down on the fats and proteins, and then you'll be like, oh, why my sugar craving come back? It's because you're basically all that adrenal output is coming down. Right? So now you know what your actual hunger, a healthy appetite is supposed to feel like. If you're having a sugar craving, usually it's because your brain is craving sugar. So the more insulin sensitive you become, the lower your blood sugar gets. And as your blood sugar goes lower, your brain and your nervous system craves more sugar. It's not a junk food craving, it's a glucose craving. Right? So like, for example, caffeine, appetite suppressant. Right? Yeah. Adrenal output. Fat and protein, appetite suppressant. Yeah, adrenal output. Higher glucagon, higher adrenaline, higher cortisol. All these things keep increasing. So you get lower insulin. You get a suppression of your appetite. These things raise your blood sugar from stored fat rather than dietary carbs. If you're gonna have a diet that is high in acidic foods, like high in fat, protein, and whatnot, your body has a safety mechanism that will shut your appetite off from eating, so that your body can clear out the excess nitrogen and lipids from your bloodstream. Because if you don't, you're gonna die. Right? And too much nitrogen, too much lipid saturation in your bloodstream will kill you. So your kidneys have to work real hard in order to level that out and get rid of the excess stuff. And your adrenal gland, like a dimmer switch for your kidneys. So more adrenal output leads to more kidney output. Right? So the more accumulation is you, your adrenals are going to kick on, and then your kidneys are going to work harder to filter that stuff out. It's a safety mechanism. That's how your body protects itself metabolically. That's what it's supposed to do. All right. Let me catch up with some of y'all here in the comments. Look at y'all. Big shout out to everybody in Mama in here. What's going on, yo? From everybody. You in Hawaii? Hawaii? Agnes, what's going on? Good to see you in here. Clifton. I like the name Clifton. I drink ashwagandha tea daily in the mornings. Yeah, that'll really wake you up. That'll get you going there for sure. Ashwagandha leads to more energy in the mornings, and ashwagandha typically leads to better sleep at night. Right? It's what's called an adaptogen. What's going on? Good to see you in here. I usually have my nuts and fruits together. Yeah, I mean, but you don't have the underlying health issues. So you can definitely do that. Do rice cakes feed your yeast also? Yes. What are your thoughts on L-theanine? Oh yeah, phenomenal stuff. I mean, you want to talk about really waking your brain up. You want to talk about optimizing your nervous system and brain chemistry? Yeah, L-theanine will do it for sure. A couple of weeks ago. Oh, what's going on, Mark? Mark, by the way, hold on a second. Did you see if this is the right Mark? Okay, different Mark. All right, never mind. I had another Mark recently join the tribe, became a tribe member. By the way, folks, I do streams like this multiple times a week, as well as a high raw guide. I just released a new raw vegan diet plan as well for healing and chronic illness reversal. Video overview of the whole diet. I got another doing this week as well. So it'll be a whole series of different diet plans to follow. So if you want to add things like that, the whole and definitely join, become a tribe community member. Right? You get access to the full book. Right? Also, if you have some personal issues and you need like a personal plan, or you need coaching, or you just want to get on a call and talk through your issues and get some solutions moving forward, definitely hit the link in the description of the video and book a call. You can book a call with me, or you can join the community. All right, we do weekly group calls, a high raw vegan guide with diet plans and all the methodology explained. Fasting guide, right? Alternate day fasting guide, and training programs, right? As well as the mindset and development video series. So all of that is available to our members, and you can access that through the link in the description video. Let's see, what'd you say? A couple of weeks ago, I ate way too many green split peas. Take days off of work. What? You make green split peas and then what happened? Take days off of work. Oh, you go, how about? Oh, I'm getting some lag here now, huh? How about pairing for iron? So basically, if you want iron, higher levels of iron concentration in your diet, and to maximize iron absorption, increasing the amount of vitamin C in your diet. Basically, if you pair high iron food, you pair vitamin C, that can increase iron absorption by like upwards of 8%. I'm having some. What's going on? It's just really climbing. It's lagging out. Uh-oh. Apologize for the lagginess. I think I may have to close something down here. Oh, for those of you who are tuning, so it's definitely recorded. Then I'll upload it for tribe members also, a recorded version. on, brother? I see you out in the streets, keeping consistent with action. I'm a fan. I think that if you're gonna do like a coffee or something like that, the mushroom coffee is definitely a much better option. Right. So yeah, if it's your budget, I'll say go for it. That's really good tick for brain chemistry. Mushrooms are like really good for brain chemistry. What would you rate copper efficiency? Well, pretty much a raw fair diet is really going to be of copper. So adding fruit diet, kiwi, grapes, leafy green vegetables, hemp seeds, right, pumpkin seed kernels. These are big sources of copper. Right? I mean, just have a high raw fruit based diet, you'll get like any. Oh, you said it's better than my screen is freezing. Ooh, oh. Yeah, because I'm streaming too. I'm streaming Instagram also. So big shout out to the folks tuning in on Instagram. I don't normally stream to multiple forms at the time. I stopped doing that because I was doing all like damn no, apparently. Yeah, you see, there's a lot of freezing. All right. Instagram, let me let you go. Definitely jump over on YouTube to watch the replay or catch the rest of the stream. Make some minutes here. You know, overloaded. That lag. Yeah, a lot of lagging. All right. All right, fair enough. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. That's what I wanted to cover tonight. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. I got my work day started. All right. So I'm cooking up some things for the folks and try. I'm also going to be doing raw vegan diet plans for health. So that's how I'm as well. And as from the day group coaching, I got a busy day. So Tribe by Nuance members, big shout out to you. And keep a lookout. We'll let y'all know when things are posted in the community. And that about does it. Appreciate everybody. Talk to you.